The perfect time to go for therapy.
Never. Never go to therapy. Just go to ChatGPT. There it is, all your problems solved. There's also something called toxic positivity. I'm not willing to accept that I can be weak at times too. Then it's going to prove toxic.
We also go through a lot of career breaks with motherhood, with a lot of health struggles, etc. And that kind of shakes our confidence. So if one had to rebuild that confidence from scratch, what steps should they take?
Self-confidence is not the same thing as self-acceptance.
Since the whole mental health awareness started, it started with social media. But I feel that people also misuse that a lot.
The bigger damage is if I start believing that I'm suffering from it. It won't motivate me to work on changing it.
On the Blue Carpet Talks, we bring you the women who change how we see ourselves and the world. I'm Jenny Haria, the founder of J, the brand you go for when you think of power dressing. Today's conversation is one every woman will relate to. Because no matter how confident we look on the outside, on the inside, we've all asked, am I enough? Do I look enough? Am I doing enough? Our guest has spent over 20 years helping people untangle exactly those thoughts. She's a clinical psychologist, one of India's top REBT experts, and the director of InVivo, the only partner of the Albert Ellis Institute here. She's guided thousands of students, professionals, and clients towards clarity and confidence. Meet Swati Khanolkar, a woman who shows us that true self-worth isn't in achievements or appearance, but in the acceptance we give ourselves. Swati, welcome to the Blue Carpet Talks. We're very excited, and a lot of this conversation is something that so many of us go through. So I'm super, super excited to have this conversation.
Thank you, Jenny. My pleasure to be here.
So I just wanted to ask, and this is something that I've been thinking for a long time, why did you choose psychology or psychotherapy? And it at a time where there was barely any awareness about it. Like today, a lot of people know about therapy, mental health, but when you started, I think you started 20 years ago, right?
Right.
That time there was no awareness. So why start that?
Well, maybe I think that was the reason,
Okay.
that there wasn't awareness. And I think back then, before I was introduced to psychology as a subject, all of us experience emotions, right? And I experienced them back then quite intensely, but I didn't understand them. I didn't understand where these emotions came from, what to do with them, what impact they had. And back then, we barely spoke about them to anyone, right? Amongst friends also, we would probably talk more about what happened,
Yeah.
right? But not so much about what I felt when that happened.
And mental health as a word, I don't think
Right.
it was even identified back
Right.
then.
Not so much. So I was lucky for it to be a subject in my curriculum when I joined St. Xavier's College.
Oh, how nice.
But when I was introduced to the subject, I said, hey, this is my chance to actually understand everything that I have experienced. So I think that's why the fascination started. And also the second reason I think is once I learned that we are not just helpless sort of victims of circumstances, that there's something that we can actually do about our emotional experiences.
Yeah.
We can regulate it.
Yeah.
So I think that's what was the spark that led me to decide that this is something I wanted to pursue as a career.
Nice. It's about changing that narrative. And it's not like this is who I am or this is what
Right.
is happening to me, but
Yeah.
actually going on to fix it whatever needs fixing.
Right. And that it can be fixed.
Yeah.
That I'm not stuck here. Right.
Nice.
So yeah.
So how did InVivo start? Like, what's the story behind the name, the entire journey?
Right.
Tell us.
Well, I was always interested in teaching. And I was teaching in colleges. I was teaching psychology
Okay.
in a couple of colleges. And well, I thought that was going to be my career. But then a challenging experience happened and I realized that I couldn't continue teaching
Okay.
in colleges.
Okay.
So I said, look, I don't want to stop teaching and teaching psychology especially.
Yeah.
So then I'm going to start on my own. Why don't I, reach out to people who are interested in learning about it on my own? That's how the whole idea of starting my training center came up. I was already practicing therapy before that. So at InVivo, there are two parts, right? What we do is practicing therapy. So seeing clients and helping them with their problems, and training psychologists
Okay. Got it.
to practice therapy. So I was passionate about both. And so I said, okay, I'm going to do this on my own. The name, InVivo is a Latin word,
Okay.
which means in real life.
Wow. Nice.
And that's a good representative of what REBT stands for. REBT is a therapy we practice at the center, Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy.
Okay.
And that therapy has a very realistic scientific outlook towards mental health.
Understood.
And so I thought in real life was a good representation of what that philosophy stood.
Very cool.
So then InVivo.
Nice.
Yeah.
So when you started InVivo, what did you think you wanted to change? I mean, I know that you were passionate about teaching and then practicing therapy, but then if you had to give me one vision of InVivo, what would that be?
Well, the vision was, REBT is a very structured way of
Okay.
practicing therapy.
Okay.
For many years, I think therapy has been a bit of an abstract concept, Jenny.
Hmm.
Also, people looked at it as something that you can just, go to a therapist, vent out, talk,
Yeah.
and they're going to listen.
Yeah.
And that we probably didn't know or expect more from it than that. But REBT has more to offer. And it's structured in a way that, yes, of course, I'm interested in listening to your problem, but I can also help you to develop the skills to work on the solution. And that's what I wanted to bring to people.
Nice.
That through practicing REBT, we can teach people that, look, it's like a skill that you can learn. It's a tool that you can learn. And then you can keep using it for yourself. It's also making you independent in that sense.
Yeah.
Right? So that, I think, was what I was driven by.
So for a noob like me, honestly, we only know about mental health and mental health problems hai, to therapy chahiye. Bas. That is what I think the general public really knows. But you mentioned the REBT, the word twice or thrice.
Yeah.
Can you tell me what are the different types of therapies that are there out there? And what is REBT? And more like a little more detail about REBT.
I mean, see, to simplify the different types of therapies, there are quite a few out there. All right. But they're only different in terms of the paths that they take towards
The
mental
approach.
health, right?
Okay.
So what they believe to be the most effective way of helping people with emotional problems,
Okay.
right? That's how they are different.
Okay.
But what's underpinning all of them, what's the commonality amongst all of them is, I mean, this is an example I give, quite often in the trainings, is that, let's suppose I want to travel. Now today we're here at the studio and Goregaon, and I came from Khar. And this is my problem. I want to travel from Khar to Goregaon. How do I travel? Right? Now, if I'm going to solve a practical problem like this, what I would typically do is I would look at what are my different options, costs and benefits. And then I'd say, okay, well, this is the one that works the best for me. But what happens with us human beings is that I may be sitting at Khar thinking, oh, but it's raining today, and oh, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to reach Goregaon. And I don't even know where that place is. What if I get late? What if I get stuck? Now what I'm doing is, I'm creating emotions about going to Goregaon. I'm anxious. I'm frustrated. I'm helpless, let's say, right? Now, all therapies are meant to help people to first deal with these emotional problems so that they can solve their own practical problems. Right? It's not my job to tell somebody, take this route to Goregaon. They can figure it out by themselves if I help them to overcome the anxiety.
It's just about helping them to be able to think from that perspective.
Right. But the thinking is only possible once you've overcome your emotional disturbance, Jenny. Otherwise, your mind is foggy. It's clouded with the emotion. So psychotherapies or counseling, as people call it more generically, is about getting help for your emotional problems so that you can think more clearly about finding solutions to your practical problems.
Interesting.
So that's the commonality.
So basically, it's almost like figuring out the root of it and then actually starting from there.
So not just taking Crocin for fever.
Yeah.
Do you see? It's really like looking at, identify the infection and then it's not just symptomatic treatment.
This is so relevant because a lot of people, before they want to take any plunge or start something, they exactly get into this overthinking that what if I fail? What if it doesn't happen? What if, I'm not able to do it?
That's true.
And I attended this one session where this guy said, just don't think about anything and start. And whatever problems come on the way, you will figure out as they come. And that is so relevant because if you don't get out of the whole thinking zone, you'll not probably even be able to take that step.
Sure.
So I think this is where...
That's true. Also, if I may add, the thoughts are patterns. So if I'm thinking that way today, I'm not thinking that way just today.
Yeah.
These are patterns that I'm carrying. These are habits that I have been unknowingly rehearsing. So in REBT, what we also do, that's also why it's a depth-centered way of working, is we help people identify those patterns so that when I'm helping them, it's not just for today's problem.
Right.
It's for all similar problems that they are going to create
In the future,
because they carry the patterns.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm over asking on this question, but could you help break REBT down? Like you said, it's rational, emotive, behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
So if you could just break it down, like probably a little bit about the process. You mentioned that you fix the emotion part of it, but if you could help break down a little bit of a process, that'll be helpful.
Sure. Let's do that with the help of an example. That's the easiest way to understand it, yes? And let's take a common example. Let's say someone's come to therapy saying, I'm anxious. What are you anxious about? I don't think my boss likes me. Or, they gave me negative feedback for my work the last time. Now, this is how we look at it. The emotional problem that this person is experiencing is anxiety, right?
Yeah.
So we experience anxiety in our body, at times physiological symptoms. But the most common way in which anxiety shows itself, Jenny, is that we start to avoid situations, right? We start to escape situations. So it's a problem for this person because at work, now she has stopped facing her boss. She's making excuses to avoid.
Yeah.
She's probably delaying her work even further. So she's started a cascade of problems because she's told herself, I can't deal with my boss giving me negative feedback, right? So the adversities, boss gave me negative feedback. That's the A. The consequence, which is the C, is my anxiety. Now, most people will look at it as, it is making me anxious.
Yeah.
My boss is making me anxious. And if I believe that entirely, I'm going to feel pretty powerless because now I'm thinking, oh, my boss has to absolutely like me. Or they have to change in order for my problem to be solved.
Yeah.
Luckily, that's not entirely true for us,
Okay.
right? It's not true because, well, so many different people maybe face the same problem of their superiors not liking them or giving them negative feedback. They don't all robotically react the exact same way. We don't. There is so much variability.
Yeah.
And the variability basically tells us that there is a factor, there's a variable that is my own that I'm bringing to the table. My mind window, right? I'm looking at the boss's behavior through my mind window, through my patterns, like I said earlier.
Yeah.
So what we do in REBT is we help people see those patterns and then teach them how to change them. So that to begin with, I can regulate my own anxiety.
Yeah.
And then I can think about how do I handle this situation of negative feedback from my boss? So then instead of avoiding, I'll probably go and talk to my boss.
Right.
I'll ask questions. I'll get better feedback. Or I'll be assertive and say, look, you had no business talking to me like that. Whatever it is, I'm facing the situation
Yeah. Rather than running away from
because
it.
I've regulated my anxiety.
Yeah.
So in that sense, it's like reclaiming your power so that you don't feel like you're a victim of the situation and keep waiting for the situation to change.
Interesting.
I hope that was helpful.
Yeah, that
in a
was super
nutshell.
helpful. And
Yeah.
I think what I take from that is just probably taking control of your emotions also. Understanding your emotion. Because a lot of times, like you said, we understand what it's giving me anxiety. But then the deeper emotion or why am I avoiding my boss is something that we don't understand, or it's not a human tendency to even go that deep. So understanding or taking control of the root cause of your emotion.
Because we can be
also.
scared of our emotions, Jenny. The emotional experience is hard for most people. So we're scared. Also, people could believe that they're weak or, that they need to run away as their first sort of strategy to deal with it. So in therapy, what happens is you sort of familiarize yourself with your own emotions. Once you get to know them and you know that you can regulate them. Regulation is a key word. You see that it's not getting rid of the emotion. It's not blocking your emotion. It's not distracting yourself and looking the other way. It's really actually getting to know it and then using it for your own aid, right? And that can be learned in therapy.
I smile right now because whatever three things that you said, it's not this, it's not that.
Yeah.
Usually when somebody's upset, they go to their relatives or friends and they say that this is happening. And everybody who's not aware of the system will exactly say, ye karo, avoid karo, ya idhar udhar dekho, distract karo. These are not solutions, these are quick fixes. But I think people who don't understand the depth of it are the ones who come and give such solutions. So it's quite funny. Most people think that therapy is for big breakdowns. Like something big should happen to me, only then I'll go for therapy. So A, what is that trigger that they can identify that now I need help? B, is therapy only for a big breakdown?
Yeah. Okay, let's start with A. Again, I'll give an example to say, how do you know whether... Okay, let me first start by saying that not all unpleasant emotions are unhealthy.
Okay.
So I believe that a lot of people live with this idea that all negative emotions are bad emotions, unhealthy. Get rid of all negative emotions, only keep positive emotions. That's not even possible. It's unrealistic. The human mind is not made that way, right? We can't get rid of them. So then what we need to understand is all negative emotions are not unhealthy. What do I mean by that? I need a certain amount of concern, worry about an exam to prepare for it.
Yeah.
If I don't feel anything, I will not take it seriously. So in that sense, the concern or worry is a healthy negative emotion. It's helping me.
Yeah.
So first part of my answer to your question is, I've got to check whether this emotion is blocking me. If it's blocking me, meaning I'm running in the other direction. My goal is I want to go talk to the boss, and here I am avoiding her, right? My goal is to do well in the exam, but I don't even open the books to study, right? My goal is I want to have a healthier relationship, but I yell and scream in my conversation with my partner. So if it's blocking me from what I want to achieve, then that's a good indicator to say, hey, this is unhealthy, and maybe I need to do something about it. The second thing is, see, many people will come to us. This is a common example, so I'll give it. Say, I'm very angry when I'm stuck in traffic on my way to work in the morning. And this person is so angry that they might get out of their car and pick a fight with someone, etc. They're that angry, yes? Then they go to work, get busy with work. By the end of the day, if you meet them, and if you say, oh, do you think you have an anger problem? They're likely to say, who, me? No, not at all. I don't have an anger problem. Now, how do we know whether this person really has an anger problem? Is if the next day morning, when they're back in the traffic situation, they're angry again, then it's a problem.
Yeah.
Because, like I was saying A, B, C earlier when I was explaining, when the A is back, when the adversity is back, the C is back, the anger is back, which means you don't have a sustained way of dealing with it. Then it's a problem. So that's also when people should think of seeking help.
Interesting.
And as far as the second part of your question, big breakdowns are very often, Jenny, accumulation of small breakdowns.
Yes. I think mostly they're
right?
just that.
Unless there is a very big adversity like loss and death, and then of course a big breakdown. But you know that big breakdown is again not unhealthy. You will grieve if there is loss. That's not a psychological problem. But in most other cases, it's because you haven't dealt with the small breakdowns in time. A very common thing that people tell us is, I didn't think the problem was big enough for me to go to therapy.
Yeah.
So even now, it's almost like people wait till the problem becomes big enough. And then it warrants going to therapy. And I'd strongly recommend that we shouldn't do that. Because therapy can also help you to prevent problems.
It can help you in a lot of other ways. And I feel that therapy might not just help you with problems, but just a way of life. Right?
Oh, for sure.
For improving productivity.
Like developmental goals, you know what I mean? Like I want to do better kind of goals, for sure.
But I think the bigger part is that in India specifically, there's a lot of taboo around therapy or mental health. A lot of people assume that if you're going to a therapist, that means there's something wrong with your mind.
Yeah.
What can we do to change this?
Yeah.
I mean, I know that there is there. So, kyun hai wo to it's been societal, whatever. So
it's conditioning.
Yes.
Yeah.
What can we do to change this as a narrative?
Yeah. I mean, see, one of the things is people still look at family and friends as a good alternative to a therapist.
Yeah. And nowadays, even
ChatGPT, isn't it? So, I mean, I think there has to be awareness as to what does a professional therapist or a counselor bring that an unqualified person, no matter how much they care about you, they can't. And not even AI then. There are limitations even to AI, right? Sure. But people don't know that. So my answer to your question is, I think, and we are already doing that, that kind of awareness of what does professional, now we understand that with physical medicine, don't we?
Yeah.
If I have a physical problem, I'm not going to go to my uncle and say, I mean, maybe I do that too. But at some point, I will consider going to a gastroenterologist. I will go to a specialist more readily than I will go for my mind. So that's gradually changing. We're working on it. For that awareness that a professional therapist is trained in a way to provide you with the takeaway that your friends and family can't. That's one. Second, I think there also has to be more conversation about confidentiality and non-judgmentality in therapy, because people also are withdrawn out of anxiety about, I will talk about my personal problems, will I be judged for it? I mean, imagine, right? You're sitting in front of a live human being. That's why probably also AI feels easier, right? Because you don't
have to face anybody.
But with a live therapist, people can feel a bit intimidated. And so then for them to also know that the therapist is trained to be non-judgmental. They're not sitting there and judging you. And they're going to respect your privacy. It's a part of, it's a code of ethics for us, really. So that kind of awareness, we are trying our best now through social media and other sources. But I'd encourage people also, therefore, to just go and try one session. because it's experiential. After all, Jenny, there's only so much that you can tell people in words.
Yeah.
But that they should give themselves a chance to go and experience at least one interaction. I think that might begin to change things.
And as we were speaking, since both of us have watched Suits or are watching
Correct.
Suits,
Yeah.
the role of Lewis's therapist in his life
Right.
is the reason he actually made it till the end. Because I
Yeah.
don't know if you've reached that.
No, I'm kind of just starting that
yeah,
piece.
So he has his therapist and he goes to him, and Lewis is anyway short-tempered and
Yeah,
he
he's
has problems
struggling
with
to a lot.
everything.
Correct.
So that therapist actually changed him as a person completely, and they've shown that in that entire series.
Right. I haven't seen that journey yet. He's just
Yeah.
begun talking to the
Right,
therapist.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's phenomenal how much difference that
For
is. In
sure.
some quarrel, I think he brought Harvey in also, and both of them went to the therapist and all. But it's phenomenal how much change that can bring.
Right.
And this brings me to my next question: that we as women wear a lot of hats: professional, mother, wife, daughter. In general, the caretaker of the house as such.
Right.
So, do you think that this always on role that we have actually ends up becoming a mental health issue? And a lot, what's happening in the background?
So, I don't think it's the wearing many hats that is the problem.
Okay.
It can potentially become a problem, Jenny, if I start to believe that I must excel in every role that I play. Right?
Yeah.
I think women are capable of playing multiple roles, but the pressure or the disturbance can come from if I believed that I must excel in every role.
I'm not a good mother.
Correct.
I'm not a good
right.
wife.
Right. Or that I must be approved
Yeah.
by people in every role. Right. Or my worth is attached to these roles. Right. I am good enough only if I am a perfect mother, or if I'm able to balance both work and personal life perfectly well. So when we put these demands on ourselves is, I think, when the real problem starts. And it's quite interesting. I'll urge our audience to actually check that in themselves, that we may not be aware that we're doing this on a very conscious level in our day-to-day living. But if they sit with themselves and think about it, they're going to see that more often than not, they are using this language with themselves. We are all saying very often
100%.
that I must, and oh God, my worth is, I have to be there for my daughter. This language of the have to and I must and I should, that is a lot of pressure. So I think that's what needs to be changed.
I, as a human, always live in guilt. Like, I have identified this. I know that this happens with me, but I am a person who feels guilty about everything.
Right.
Even if I'm doing something good, I'll feel guilty about something else. If I'm at work, I'll feel guilty about not being at home with my husband. If I'm with him, I'll feel guilty of not working.
Yeah.
Even if I'm taking care of him, like he was sick the other week and I was taking care of him, I still kept feeling I didn't do this. I did 10 things, but the 11th thing made me feel that I'm not a good wife because I didn't do this for me. And this also, like you said, comes out of this feeling that I want to be perfect at everything and I'm not able to. But honestly, I don't know how to get out of this guilt zone, and it eats me down at times. Right? How much guilt can you take as a human?
Right.
But
you've got to make more space to allow the failing and the flaws. Right? When we put these demands on ourselves, it's like we're constricting the space. I'm saying I will accept myself only if I do all of this perfectly well. But when I broaden that space and I say, no, I'm going to accommodate my flaws and my mistakes and my failings along with everything else that I'm also doing well. Jenny, you're doing both this and that. You see, very often we don't see that about ourselves. We see only this. Or, like we say, I want to paint the whole circle black. So that's how guilt and anxiety and shame can come. That's a struggle. I think all of us, it's a conditioning. It's also, it's hardwired in our system.
Right.
But it can be undone. It can be changed.
Interesting. That brings me to another question, and it's a little more linked to the whole taboo question. Since the whole mental health awareness started, it started with social media. Right? Mostly, like in my opinion, that's how it started. And then a lot of people also started misusing it. To the extent that any emotion, they would be like, I have a mental health problem. I remember I had these employees, that one of these employees, he'd just come in like in probably he worked with us for a month or something. After that, there was some problem at his home, and I just asked him for a work update. And then he completely went gung on me. He's like, "Do you not have any emotion? I have mental health problems." I'm like, bro, I'm just asking for a work update. Right? It's not
Yeah.
that big a deal.
Yeah.
But I feel that people also misuse that a lot.
Sure.
Maybe in their professional or personal lives or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
So have you observed anything like that
Mhm.
happening with your clients or
Oh,
something?
for sure. So it's like now it's changing in a way that before we can give any kind of a diagnosis to our clients,
They come with a diagnosis.
they're telling us what's wrong with them, right? They're using these big words,
Depression.
narcissistic personality disorder and whatnot. And
Okay.
yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot of talk on narcissism on social media if you go look. And then ADHD and very young kids, parents will come and say, "Oh, my child has ADHD. Why? Because he can't seem to sit in one place for a very long time." Now, look, there is a reason for these diagnoses is only so that we understand what's going on and we help people accordingly.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that it's being misused in a way that we are using these words very loosely. The bigger damage is if I start believing that I'm suffering from it. It won't motivate me to work on changing it.
Yeah.
It's in fact going to lead me to use it to label myself and then get out of situations, like in your example, that I'm actually not making an effort to do better, or I'm not seeking help. I'm in fact victimizing myself by saying, "Look, I have this. Now, what can I do about it?" So it's going to lead to more hopelessness and helplessness. Not advisable at all. I strongly encourage people to not self-diagnose
I
like
think
that.
it happens more with younger kids now. Again,
Right.
I think it's a result of social media. I'd say Ki every young kid, if there's some adversity in their life, they're like, "I have mental health problems. I am."
Yeah, because we want to oversimplify things. You see, like we just want to think about it as, either I'm this or that. So either I am mentally healthy or unhealthy. There's a whole lot in between that. It's
Yeah.
much more complex.
Yeah.
And that complexity can't be learned on social media. It's, you're doing yourself a lot of injustice if you fall
But
prey to that.
just another perspective. I know we're digressing a little bit, but just another perspective. That is it that they're doing it for attention? Because they are making reels out of it, saying that I am mentally unwell or anything.
Yeah.
Are these kids also doing it for attention?
I mean, that's possible because it's become, human beings tend to go from one extreme to another before we can find the middle ground again.
Yeah.
So if you see that the trend with mental health from one extreme of don't talk about it, be ashamed, hide it. Now we've gone to the other extreme of let's all talk about it. In fact, it's something to, brag about almost, or it's a way to show the world that I'm cool and I don't mind talking about my problems.
Yeah. Or it is a shield that
Or-
hey, you can't do this to me because I'm going to
Yeah,
therapy.
yeah, but I'm cool enough to sort of talk about
Yeah.
it. Now that's fine, but that's it still means that they're talking about it, but I don't know if they're seeking the right help for it. So if you're only doing it to get attention or to get out of situations, then it's not going to help. But if I say, okay, well, I think there is a problem, I'm acknowledging is good,
Yeah.
but then what are you doing about it?
Yeah.
If they're seeking help for it, then I'd say that's a good step forward.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So coming back to our earlier conversation about women and how they wear so many hats, another observation is that most women consider self-care as selfish.
Yeah.
They feel like, how can I invest on myself?
Hmm.
So they always put themselves last. So why does that happen? And if one of the viewers is watching this and feeling exactly that,
Yeah.
what one step can she take to make it better for herself?
Why does that happen? I think it's years and years of conditioning, cultural conditioning. I mean, I think it happens to varying degrees in different cultures, but it definitely happens to a big extent in ours.
Yeah.
The role of a woman was carved out in a certain way, in a certain mold for many years, and we've come a long way from that. But I think we've not still sort of let go of those expectations. And I think there is a conceptual problem here, right? Which is that we look at it as either or, meaning I either take care of myself or I take care of you. So if I prioritize you over me, I'm a good person. But if I prioritize me over you, I'm selfish.
Yeah.
But another way of looking at it could be, and that's what I'd ask our viewers, especially women, to consider, that another way of looking at it could be, why can't I do both this and that?
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
I can take care of myself and my child
Yeah.
and my partner and other people. Right? It doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. And in fact, you're going to run on empty if you don't take care of yourself. This whole, people who've tried it, I think they know it from experience that it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because you're pouring from an empty cup. you're not going to be able to sustain giving more to other people if you have nothing left to give.
Yeah.
So I think we should take it out of morals. We should not make it about right and wrong. And we should look at it as a practical choice.
Yeah.
That if I take care of myself and if I am physically and mentally healthy, I just simply have more to give to people that I care for. So I can do both this and that.
Amazing. I think the fact that you said both this and that reminds me of a Shark Tank pitch. So there is this brand called Niche Hair. Its founder is Parul Gulati. She's quite out there, marketing her product. And somebody asked, so she also is an actor.
Okay.
So the Sharks asked her, is acting your full-time job? She said yes. Then they asked, is Niche Hair your full-time job? She said yes. Then they asked, how can two things be both your full-time jobs?
Right.
So she gave a wonderful answer. She said, I can be a wife and a mother at the same time, and both are my full-time jobs. So how is this any different?
Yes.
And I was like, that hit, because nobody thinks from that perspective at that time.
That's a great example of the point that I was making. That is the both and approach. That I don't have to be either this or that. Yeah, that's interesting.
So this brings me to another question, and probably a varying perspective, that most women who have accomplished something or have settled in their life think that I should be happy because I have everything, and they still feel drained inside. Why does that happen?
Once you decide that my happiness is contingent on what I achieve, then it's going to be a moving target.
Yeah,
so which means even when I've achieved X, I'll find that I'm not happy the way I'd imagined it, because my mind is saying, oh no, now I think I'm going to be happy once I achieve Y and then Z, right?
Goalpost to goalpost.
So that's a problem, because the basic concept of my happiness is contingent on what I achieve or who approves of me, right? Or whether I do a role perfectly is in itself a problem. And I have a great example, again, we use in therapy. We call it the money model. It'll make a point that I'd like our viewers actually to know about. So the model is this, that look, if I'm saying to myself that whenever I put my hand in my pocket, I should have 20 rupees.
Okay.
I absolutely should have 20 rupees in my pocket at all times for me to be happy. Now, of course, if I check and I find that I have less than 20, I'm going to be unhappy. That's understandable.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is if I check and I find that I have 25. So I wanted 20. I was saying I must have 20. I have 25. Shouldn't I be happy? I will be, but momentarily.
Yeah.
I will make myself unhappy immediately, very quickly, even when I have 25. You know how? Because my mind will start to think, what if I lose 6 rupees? Then I will have less than 20. Do you see? Because I have said to myself that I must have 20 at any given point. So even when I have it, I'm not happy because I'm thinking I will lose it.
In my mind, I was thinking that the next day also I'll expect myself to have 25 now and not 20.
Yes,
because
probably.
I'm at 25 at this point of time.
Yes, probably that too. You're right. The other thing is I must have, now I've changed it and I've said now 20 is not enough. I must have 25. And also, like I said, what if I lose? Because I've decided that I can't be happy if I have less than 20. That's what I meant by it's dependent on external factors. Yeah, that's a problem.
Interesting.
Yeah.
We also go through a lot of career breaks with motherhood, with marriage, with a lot of health struggles, etc. And that kind of shakes our confidence. So if one had to rebuild that confidence from scratch, what steps should they take? I mean, I know I'm asking extremely deep and longer questions, but for just some quick one step that you think is a step towards that.
Right. So I think I'd like to start by saying that self-confidence is not the same thing as self-acceptance.
Okay.
We've misunderstood the word confidence. We think confidence, the way we look at it, again, comes from looking a certain way, talking a certain way, achieving certain things, being viewed as a certain image on social media.
Factors,
So then I'm going to be on a seesaw. So when things are looking up, my confidence increases. But when things are not going well for me, my confidence decreases. And that's a problem for your mind. So how women could build self-confidence actually is quite ironically by accepting themselves as the full package first. Right? And to say that I define it it does not define me.
Yeah.
Meaning, if I'm saying that, I want to run this practice, I am saying that this is good. I like it, right? I want to do it. So I'm judging it, my work, as good for me. But if I start believing that, what, it defines me, meaning my worth is now defined by my work. So my value is decided by, I'm a psychologist and I run my own center. Do you see, then it's a problem, because if I don't do well tomorrow, my self-confidence will come crashing down. So the question is, can I accept myself with when I'm doing well and when I'm not doing well? On days where my hair is shining.
It's so difficult, no? To accept yourself on days that are not.
It's ongoing work. It's lifelong ongoing work.
Yeah.
But with practice, see, the human mind is a creature of habit, Jenny. And we underestimate practice. Many people, and I think this is an important point, many people think, but I know this, but the change doesn't happen. Well, it will happen if you practice it. Right? It's like how we build body muscles. Knowing how to build, you said you're working out, right? Now, attending a lecture on how muscles are built is not going to change anything about your body. You've got to show up and do the work every day, consistently. So that's the way to build your mind muscle too. If we do it regularly enough, these things that are strongly ingrained in us can also change. So that was a long answer to your question, but I hope I answered it.
Very relevant because a lot of times now the narrative is a little different tangent, but you keep manifesting, you keep saying those affirmations every day that, I am this, I am that, I will be better at this, etc. But the point is that it's not just about saying, right? It's about living those, and it is about telling yourself at difficult moments that these affirmations work, not doing it every morning. It doesn't help that way.
I'm glad you brought this up because I want to make a point about this. There's also something called toxic positivity.
Yeah, I've heard.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, but I would love for the viewers to know.
No, meaning, so if I only keep saying to myself, it's helpful to say to myself, that I am strong, I will do well. Of course, why not, right? That's, your mind is going to believe what you tell it. But if I only keep doing that, and I'm not willing to look at the other side at all, which means I'm not willing to accept that I can be weak at times too, or I can have a bad hair day too, then it's going to prove toxic. Because again, I'm doing the same thing. Do you see? I'm saying, no, I have to be this to accept.
Kind of trying to restrict the negative emotions.
But if I say, okay, hey, all right, I am strong and I can also be weak. I will be smart at times, but I can also do something very stupid. Now, can I accept both this and that? Again, can I accept the whole of me? That approach significantly changes a lot. Because then I'm not scared of the stupid and the weak and the bad hair. You know what I mean? I'm not scared of it.
So then this affirmation thing should also have some line that it's okay if I don't feel good today. It's okay if I'm not performing the best at my work. This is also something that we should try to tell ourselves.
And we do that in therapy. RBT stresses on that a lot. We call it unconditional self-acceptance.
Interesting.
Without these conditions.
So this brings me to our next point, is that we women go through a lot of changes in our bodies through different moments, like marriage, kids, stress, in general, hormonal changes, PCOD, there's a lot. When I look at myself in the mirror, after I have probably grown fatter than I was, it shakes my confidence. It doesn't make me feel good about myself. So at that point of time, honestly, self-acceptance is very hard because I don't like what I see in the mirror.
No, correct.
So how to just, I don't know the question, but how can that improve?
I get your question. I get your question. We have a great example for this in therapy, and we use it a lot with kids, but it works great with adults as well.
Okay.
I call it the triangle and the house example. So it's this, right? That if you're looking at a triangle, a square, a circle, independently, these are simple figures because there's 3 sides, 3 angles can only be a triangle like that. Simple shapes.
Yeah.
If you put them together in the figure of a house, the basic house that most people make, the triangle, rectangle, square, then it's now you have a complex figure because it's a combination of many different elements. Now imagine a house like that, and I'm saying this house is a triangle. Would that be true or not?
Of course not.
Because it has a triangle.
But it has also a lot of other things.
Other factors. Right? Now, when I bring that perspective to viewing myself. And I say, okay, that I don't have a very fit body today is the triangle in the house. I have that triangle and I don't like it. Let's not run away from it.
Yeah.
So that's what I meant by toxic positivity. If I started to say, I love my body the way it is. No, but I mean, look, today I don't.
Yeah.
And I'm willing to work on changing it. But today I don't. I don't. But it's just a triangle in the house. It's not the whole house. If I say the whole house is a triangle, that's simply not true. So when I look at it as a part of me, not the whole of me, do you see that it will feel like I can deal with it. It's not determining my worth as a whole person. It's a part. If I don't like it today, I can work on changing it. And that's a good approach. I mean, why shouldn't we work on changing things that we don't like? As long as we accept that these things are also a part of me.
But I feel like body positivity that we're talking about, it probably has two parts to it. One is that I am, for example, I'm talking about a plus size person. Actually, there are three parts to it, but if we're talking about a plus size person, okay. One is that it's her condition. She's plus because of some health issues, and that's the way her structure is.
Right.
Second is she's unhealthy. And she can make it better by getting healthier.
Right.
And third is she feels that she's fine.
Yeah.
But the society keeps telling you that no, you're not fine.
Right.
Like, I mean, I said this sometime earlier also that I gained 10 kgs after getting married.
Right.
It's just been 3 years. All these 3 years, every single person has told me, you've grown so fat, you've grown so fat, you've grown so fat. I think, honestly, I did not feel that I was so fat, but they made me feel that I was being fat.
Right.
So, like, body positivity can be used in different narratives. And the worst I feel is when you're unhealthy and because of social media, you're like, okay, I'm fine. No, but you're unhealthy, no? So you've got to work towards becoming healthy. You can't just put that shield of body positivity on top of you and say that, no, it's fine.
Absolutely. No, I'm glad you're raising this because again, it does have those two extremes. That at one extreme, I could put myself to shame.
Yeah.
And I'm not willing to accept, like you said, for some people, for whatever hormonal reasons, genetic reasons, my body can't look drastically different.
Yeah.
So then I've got to work on accepting it. But at the same time, if I become resigned to it, see, resignation is not the same thing as acceptance. Acceptance is to say, okay, my body is like this today, but I want to get fitter or healthier.
Yeah.
What do I do? Resignation is saying, ab to aisa hi hai. Right? And then using that under the garb of body positivity. That's not very healthy because what if it is actually physically unhealthy for you?
Exactly.
Right? But I also want to address the first part of what you said. I'm forgetting what you said. The first part of what you said was...
I said that she is...
Oh, you said the society.
Third part, yeah.
The society is going to make you feel like... we actually have a word for
problem, I think.
We call it conditions of worth. Matlab, right from the beginning, if you see how we speak to children, let's suppose a child has lied. And I want to teach the child that, look, lying is problematic behavior because it can get you in trouble. Now, what I want to teach the child is lying is bad for you. Instead, what I teach the child is, you're a bad boy because you lied. You understood the difference? So I'm teaching the child that your judgment, your worth is going to depend on that behavior. Similarly, it's going to depend on your body shape. It's going to depend on your skin color, etc., etc., right? So we have internalized these conditions. I often say to my students that it's like we've taken that stick from society's hand and we're saying, now you don't take the trouble, I'm going to beat myself.
No, what you just said, right? Lying is bad is the right narrative. And you're a bad person is not the right narrative.
Correct.
I realized that I did that with my niece or any kid. Like if they're doing something wrong, if they're hitting someone, they're like, I said that bad girls do this.
Correct.
You shouldn't do this.
Yeah.
And this is something that is very normal for us. Like, nobody realizes.
We don't realize it.
Back for it. But then I realized that later on, if we keep saying the same thing to her, at some point they will start feeling that, I'm a bad person.
Absolutely. And again, then it becomes like the whole house is a triangle. Do you see? I can't see anything that I do that is not bad. Because I painted the whole circle black. And that's almost never true about us, Jenny. We are always a mixed bag. Right? We're always a mixed bag. And we're not looking at ourselves like that.
Coming back to the whole body positivity conversation that we are having, what you're wearing or dressing for work or outfit make any difference to how I feel or my confidence or acceptance anywhere?
Oh, yes, it does. I mean, it does because, look, we haven't yet reached that sort of Zen state of, right? Like, no materialistic things matter to how I feel about myself. realistically speaking, it helps me to, I mean, it's like you go to eat something in a restaurant. You're not just going to eat to feed yourself.
Right.
You are going to appreciate the taste of it,
Yeah.
the colors of it,
Yeah.
the aromas of it,
Yeah.
right? Because our senses need that stimulation. Similarly, I'm going to like the colors of what I wear and the shape of what I wear, and it is going to make me feel good. It is a sort of validation. And I think we can use that because, like you said earlier, all of this work is hard. Unconditional self acceptance is hard work. So, every once in a while, if I can, wear certain kind of clothes that help me to validate myself, why not?
Yeah.
That's also a way of.
That's easier actually. Buying clothes is
Yeah,
easy.
exactly.
And if that makes you feel good, why not?
Correct. As long as, again, the same thing, right? As long as I know that this is a part and this does not determine my worth. So, on days when I'm not looking that great or when I'm not wearing a great outfit, I shouldn't berate myself and devalue myself. So, my value doesn't come from what I'm wearing. My happiness can come from it, not my value.
Yeah. Interesting.
Then I think why not? It's actually helpful.
While you were saying this, I had another thought in my mind. We spoke about working out earlier. Now we all know, like this is an awareness, कि जब workout करते हैं, तब diet is in control. The moment you stop working out, there's a thing ना, gym छोड़ के और मोटे हो जाओगे. That's majorly because your diet is also not in control.
Sure.
Why does my mind work like that? Ki when I work out, everything is proper in terms of health and fitness and diet. The moment I stop working out, I'll start junk eating. I'll start like, why does that happen? Why can't I still stay in control of my diet even if that one element of workout has stopped?
Yeah, we have a word for that too. We call it all or none thinking.
Okay.
So my daughter the other day, she's in grade 10 and she's decided this schedule for her that on a day when there's no school, she'll wake up at 8 a.m.
Okay.
And then start the rest of her day. And then she has a schedule and she has, she's whatever, using technology to design her day, etc. Now she tells me that if I don't wake up at 8 a.m., so I wake up at 8:30, then I won't do anything for the rest of the day. The whole thing is derailed, right? That's all or none thinking. Meaning, when I'm doing something, either I do it perfectly well or I don't do anything. That's a problem with the human mind. So when I'm gymming, so then I'll diet, so then I'll do the rest of it properly. But if one of those sort of cards falls out, then the whole thing can sort of crumble. That's the human mind. But therefore, we've got to again sort of come to the middle ground and be able to say that it's okay to do things in pieces as well. In fact, that's largely how we are going to live life. It's not going to be all or none. It's going to be, if you imagine that circle I've been talking about for a long time, it's not all black or all white.
Right.
It's going to be many circles, some of them white, some of them black, some of them gray. So when life is messy, when I'm able to allow life to be messy, then I think I'm more likely to not fall off the wagon.
Yeah, this perfectionism is quite.
It's a problem.
People think that it's a good thing that I am a perfectionist.
I know. They brag about it in social situations, but it's a problem and it's very, very distressing for people who are there. In fact, most of my clients who have a procrastination problem, Jenny, are perfectionists because they said that I have to do it perfectly well. Therefore, they don't do it because they keep postponing it.
I'm a victim of it. I am one of them as well at some points. And
for sure, all of us have been there from time to time.
Yeah. But somehow, I don't know, like I've said this to one of my friends earlier also, मुझे पता होता है ये है. Like I know that I am a victim of perfectionism. I know that if I spend one more extra minute on this work, I am just doing injustice to it because I've already spent hours extra doing this exact thing. But you can't stop yourself from just
That's
doing
the practice.
You're not happy with that output. I'll always keep thinking in my mind. So there is this thing in business, right? 80% done is better than not done. Right?
Correct.
But 80%, and I try to live by that philosophy. Right. But then when I leave it at that 80%, 2 days again, later I'll open it to make that 100%. Somehow I can't just be happy with the way it is.
Yeah. So do you see that's how you are teaching your mind not to be okay with the 80%. The 2 days later, what you do is what brings your mind back to the addiction, if I may call it. You see? But when you practice it, which means you tolerate the discomfort of not getting it 100%. And you tolerate it for 2 days, 5 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, your brain will unlearn the old habit and learn the new one. The problem with us human beings is we don't stay with it for as long to break the old habit and form a new one.
We don't have that much self-control.
And I mean, that's why therapy is about multiple sessions. Otherwise, I would take one session, give them all this gyan, and leave it at that, right? The weekly sessions help the therapist to handhold the client through this process of practice and sticking it out, even when it's difficult.
Yeah, it happens at my work also. The days I don't feel very good, I will dress very shabbily. I'll just wear whatever. My team says you've been wearing this for 3 days now, but I just don't feel like dressing up. And the days I feel good, the mornings are good, I'll just really dress up well and go. And then of course that entire day, tone is only set that way. If I don't start and I don't dress well, then and this. So even at like Jay, right? We keep saying a lot in our content that fashion is not just about fabric, but it is a lot about self-expression.
Right.
It is about like how you walk, how you talk, how you dress, how you look that day, the glow on your face, everything shows how you're feeling. It's very, very visible. Like it doesn't. Nobody needs to ask you that you're not feeling good because you're showing it anyway.
Correct. So, and if I may add to this, actually, Jenny, one more interesting thing here is even at times when I'm not feeling good, if I tell myself that no, I'm going to dress up so that I'm not a slave to my mood. And I want our audience to kind of try this, that you will see that by the middle of that day, your mood will have shifted. So our actions have the power to impact our emotions in turn.
Right. Yeah.
So, even when I'm feeling anxious, I could go and stand up on that stage with the anxiety. And you will see that in half an hour of that speech, your anxiety has changed.
It happens with me. I mean, we do a lot of shoots at office and there are a lot of days that I feel shitty and the team knows कि अच्छा ठीक है आज Jenny is low. So then I've instructed Kartik कि कुछ भी हो जाए मुझसे ये दिन shoot कराना ही है. This is what I have told him.
Yeah.
So he is behind my life. He'll be like, no, you get up and you do, you get up and we do. Genuinely after we do that shoot, I'll be like, यार कितना मजा आया करके.
Exactly.
It actually makes me feel so good and that action really helps.
It helps.
Yeah, definitely. So coming back to the whole dressing part, dressing for work. पता है हमको कि good dresses makes us feel good, but we still hesitate to invest in those kind of clothes. I mean, we only invest so much in our wedding clothes or our party clothes, but when it comes to everyday clothes that we wear for work or otherwise, we just don't invest in it. So, like, I understand it's occasion wear, but how do we change that thought process also? Ki what you feel every day and how you, like, what kind of clothes you wear every day also makes a lot of difference.
Yeah. No, so exactly what I said. I don't think people realize this, that it can have an impact the other way around as well. So my emotion and mood does not have to determine what I wear.
Yeah.
What I wear can sometimes in turn determine my mood and my emotion. Also, isn't it a way of saying that I deserve to look good today? Right? It's like saying, well, okay, maybe there are many other problems going on in life and, maybe yesterday was not a great day for me, but I still deserve to get up and dress well today. So that investment in daily wear is also a reflection of, like, it's like an investment in myself. It's going back to that self-care thing that we were talking about. But if my narrative constantly is that I don't deserve or that it's wrong to take care of myself, then I won't do it. Then it's just going to seem like an extravagance and, like a privilege. And people do that with therapy too. Like people will say, oh, but, do we really need to invest this much money in therapy? But you see, we're talking about your mind. It's going to impact everything.
Yeah, it's much better than spending lakhs of rupees then on medicine later on when you're just falling apart.
Exactly. Or, other things like you go get drunk and you spend money on that. Or you spend money on, holidays.
And that non-monetary value of your life going in that spiral or not coming back, there's a monetary value.
It's a big cost.
Efficiency,
we don't realize
productivity, whatever.
For sure. Yeah.
So we spoke a lot about unconditional self-acceptance.
Yes.
For our listeners, what would that look like in daily life? If somebody was probably unconditionally accepting themselves the way they are, how would that look?
So, I'd like them to go away with these 2-3 metaphors that we used, right? One was, if you remember, I said the mixed basket of fruits, right? If you imagine a basket of fruits, some of which are good fruits, some of which are rotten. Now, you're not going to throw away that whole basket because it has some rotten fruits. But you're not even going to sell the whole basket as a good basket because it has the rotten fruits. So at the end of it, is there one label you can give the basket? You can't. It's always going to be a mixed basket of fruits. You can change certain aspects of you if you want to, but you're not going to be flawless, right? So because complexity is the mixedness of it, and fallibility. I mean, I'd like people to know that there is, realistically speaking, human beings cannot be infallible, right? So once I accept that I'm going to be this mixed basket or the circle that I earlier described, that it's going to be black and white and gray and all of that, right? Or another analogy that we often use is, if I don't like the furniture in my house, I won't burn down the whole house, will I?
Yeah.
I will only change the furniture.
Change the furniture. Yeah.
So that's acceptance. To say that certain things can be to my dislike. I may have certain flaws. I can make mistakes, but I accept that as a part of the whole basket. Right? Once I think that happens, that I don't burn down my whole house.
But then it should not stop yourself from taking action towards fixing it.
Not at all, because you still don't like it.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing. The problematic positivity is telling yourself that I like it as it is. That's not true.
Yeah.
You're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
I don't like it. So we often say in therapy, it's not okay, but it can happen.
Right.
So once I accept it can happen, I can still work on changing what's not okay because I want to change it. I don't like it.
So if a woman out there is listening to us and she's thinking right now that she's not good enough, what steps can she take to change that thought?
So start with what we just spoke about. So remind yourself that there are certain parts of you that are not good enough.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you what, it's when you describe a lemon, you say a lemon is sour. Is that the full truth?
It is.
It's also yellow. It's
okay.
also juicy.
Okay, but we're only thinking about the taste here.
Right? So this is what they can do. Start describing specifically the part of you that you don't like right now. So the property that you don't like, because the whole of you is not that. The whole of, there is more to the lemon than just being sour. The whole house is not a triangle. So instead of saying something as generic as I'm not good enough, if you say, oh, today I didn't like the way I handled this conversation.
Yeah.
Now you can evaluate that behavior and you can say, I didn't like it, and you can work on changing it. That's constructive. What does I am not good enough mean? Because then you are putting yourself in some sort of a stable, unchangeable box. And we're not cardboard boxes, Jenny. We are balls that are rolling.
Yeah.
So we are ever changing. So don't put yourself in a box. Don't use generic statements like that. Describe the behavior more specifically so that you can focus on how to change it.
Yeah, and then again, what you said earlier, right? If I keep telling myself that I'm not good enough, I will start, even if I'm good enough, I will start feeling that, or, my actions will not be good enough to be able to do that.
For sure. And like I said, it's not going to be true forever in your life. It's, I am good at certain things and I'm not good at certain things, right? The sooner I accept that, the better I'm able to work on things that I'm good at and correct things that I'm not good at.
So we come to the last question of this section. It has been so insightful and I feel like I want to keep talking to you, but of course it can't be so long. So one of the last questions along these lines, if there is one belief that our viewer should carry with herself for the rest of her life, what should that be? Different from what you just said, obviously. But if there's one belief that you want her to stick to.
I mean, I think it's kind of a combination of everything that I've said so far. But I think go with, the whole, I said, I'm complex and fallible, right? And I may not like aspects of me, but I accept both good and bad.
Yeah. I think that is the most important thing. Yeah.
So that I accept both this and that. Even when I may not like certain aspects of me. This is a hard one to internalize. But, you will see that if we are able to internalize it, it will help us in various different contexts, right from how we feel about our bodies to how we feel about our work and careers, how we feel about our roles in personal lives, and how we take care of ourselves. It's going to impact all areas.
Even in one of the earlier conversations, I said this, but I'll repeat that one of my mentors, she keeps checking on me time and again. And every time I speak to her, she'll just tell me one thing, that Jenny, we started speaking 3 years ago. Do you remember where you were 3 years ago?
Right.
And do you remember where you are now in terms of revenue and all? And every time she says that, it makes me feel extremely good. Why? Because before that, I was just being too hard on myself that we are not growing,
Yeah.
growing. But ultimately, we did grow so much in the last
Sure.
years, but we failed to recognize
Yes.
the amount of success or
Yeah.
improvement that we've taken so far, and
Right.
we're only focusing on the negative part so much that our thought process only changed that way. So every time she
Absolutely.
meets me and she says that, I'm like,
Yeah.
this today I feel better because
Yeah.
she actually made me realize that
Yeah. So, if you're saying only positive things about yourself or only negative,
it's both.
you should immediately know that this is wrong.
Yeah, it
Right?
needs
This is
to
not
be
the full
both.
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good strategy.
Does journaling help?
Well, it helps depending on what your purpose for it is.
Okay.
If you're aware that it's going to help me be more clear about my thoughts, or even to sort of express them out so that I'm not bottling everything, and that I understand myself better when I write it down, then it helps. And to that extent, it really helps.
Yeah.
But if people look at it as the big tool that's going to change their life, then it may not be sufficient.
Understood.
Yeah, but it causes no harm. I'd encourage people to do it for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
This was such a lovely conversation, Swati. Thank you so much. I mean, there's obviously one section left.
Yes.
But the whole insights, and it honestly made me change how I want to think going forward in this one session. I'm sure therapy as a concept will do so much more as a habit, I'd say. But thank you so much. It was a
Thank you
lovely
for having me
conversation.
here. It was a lovely conversation. I enjoyed it. And you had some very insightful questions, Jenny. I mean, and made me think. And I think the kind of answers, the conversation really was built on those questions. So thank you for that. Thank you for the outfit.
Thank you.
I love what I'm wearing. And I think that also helps to kind of, it's a part of the whole experience.
How do you feel in that outfit? Like what does it say about Swati today?
I think it just fits me well, in the sense, not physically. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I'm in my own skin.
Yeah. Yep.
And it became a part of the whole experience for me. I like the color, I like the fit, I like the way it's cut. And I feel like there's some thought given to it, right? That it's I like that.
Thank you.
Yes,
This is
my
Sujata who
pleasure.
designs from our team. I think she
Yeah.
gets all the credit for it. But thank you so much. Okay, so we come to the last section of this conversation. It's called Wrong Answers Unhinged. Basically, I'll give you some questions and you only have to give me wrong answers to that. Okay?
Right. Okay.
Okay, the first question is what's the quickest way to boost self-esteem?
You compare yourself to all influencers on Instagram and then berate yourself for not being as good.
I think that's really what we do every day.
I
That's
do it all the
actually
time.
true.
Yeah.
What to do when you're anxious?
Okay, you make a spreadsheet of all the horrors that can possibly happen in your life and then make sure you go through it every night before you go to bed.
It makes me anxious already. I
That's
think.
it. Working then.
Yeah. How do you practice self-acceptance?
You make sure you go to all your family members and friends and keep prodding them to approve of you. And if they don't approve of you, then you berate yourself for it.
Oh my god, I think it's not wrong answers, it's harsh reality.
It is.
The secret to balancing work, home, and personal life.
Never say no to anyone, right? See to it that you try to do everything perfectly well and then burn out in the process.
Nice. Best way to deal with body image issues.
Okay, let's see. Wear an outfit that shows off parts of your body that you don't like. And then you go to a toxic friend and try to get their feedback about it.
Or wear something that fits you horribly and then go to it.
Yeah.
Nice. The perfect time to go for therapy.
Never. Never go to therapy. Just go to ChatGPT. There it is, all your problems solved.
Nice. Oh my god, this was so insightful and I loved the last section. I think it was so apt because it was
Yeah.
not wrong answers, it was harsh realities and which are so wrong that we do.
I know.
Thank you so much, Swati. It was an amazing conversation and I genuinely want to do a lot more of it, but then I think you'll start charging me for your services. We have a small hamper for you here.
Thank you.
I'd like you
Lovely.
to open it right
Very
now.
nice of you. Okay, let's see. This is something very interesting. Wow. How nice. Should I show it to the camera?
Yes. So this is made by a girl called Soumya. She runs this. She's actually a doctor. She's a surgeon. And between her residence, she finds time out to do this for us.
I mean, I can see the trouble you've gone through. Like, there's this picture of mine this is actually my sari.
Yeah. A lot of these
And
pointers
then-
were given by someone from a team as well. So
Supportive husband, it seems. Okay, then.
that's Tanvi.
Oh, my baby. All my 3 babies in this. Thank you for this. I really like that you put all my 3 babies here.
Yeah. That was all
Lovely.
Tanvi. A lot of these pointers. were
Classical
given by her.
dance, books. Oh, this is everything. Thank you so much.
I'm
There's
glad.
Professor Dryden somewhere here. Are you kidding me? I love this. This is really,
Wow.
really good.
Ah, yes.
He's my mentor.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It was all her. I think without her, Tanvi, we wouldn't
No,
have
I
been
can
able to
see
get all
that.
of
Thank
these
you,
pointers.
Tanvi. This is lovely. Very nice.
Thank you. Thanks,
Yeah,
Soumya.
what an idea. I mean, just for you to help. And yeah, the girl who makes it. Then.
Yeah. So this
Oh.
is a belt. We hope you can pair it with some of your dresses. We've recently
Interesting.
launched belts as a category along with our outfits.
Have
There
you?
are many more
Okay.
on the website as well.
Oh,
I hope you like
thank you for this. Because this is something that I'm not very innovative about, belts.
it. You should try this.
So
Try it on
then,
any
yes.
simple dress. I'm sure you'll love it.
Thank you so much for this, Jenny.
Thank you.
Lovely, lovely gift.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you liked it and I hope you enjoyed the conversation as well.
I did. This was solid fun.
Thank you.